is the chaos of the features and the abandonment.
This is a magnificent view.
The shocking impact of the invasion is being revealed.
These people have been escaping from cities that have been under Russian bombardment.
The damage here gives a sense of how fierce the fighting has been.
We are still discovering dead bodies here in Bucha.
See that
His allies again supplying further weapons to Ukraine, saying it's adding fuel to the conflict. Missile attacks resumed near Kyiv. Moscow says it targeted a factory making anti-ship weapons and threatens more to come. Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine acknowledged that up to 3,000 of his soldiers had died and as many as 10,000 were injured since Russia invaded his country back in February. The head of the UN's World Food Programme, we'll hear from them in the course of this half hour, said he's not getting
hospital early this morning. Emergency teams are responding there. Further west, there was another air raid alert in Lviv. Ukraine claims it has again held off Russian attempts to finally take the city. Every day, more evidence is uncovered of what people suffered under Russian occupation. The UN says it's recorded over 1,900 civilian deaths since the start of the invasion.
Across what is a vast place.
That's true. We have two distinct areas. One is the east, that's affected by fighting, where we have the cities like Kherson, Donetsk, Mykolaiv, get to these numbers. So you can imagine how big the humanitarian needs are in this country.
There's something almost perverse, isn't there, about being in a country that has for years been described as the breadbasket of Russia.
Or a common flu can turn into a life-threatening situation if you cannot go to a pharmacy and buy antibiotica or buy your diabetes medicine. So it's not just food, it's everything. Access, we need agreement from both sides to have a ceasefire for at least 48 hours to get food and medicine in safely and get the supplies back out.
Can give us some sense of the problems that you see further down the line if this war persists, because this is a country that has a very thriving agricultural sector. Presumably most of that is not functional at the moment.
Planting season, people are actually planting maize, barley, sunflower, and the winter wheat is starting to grow. This is a place where the fifth largest wheat producer, one of the biggest producers of sunflower oil and seeds, but you also see shortages of sunflower oil and wheat. The World Food Programme, for example, is buying half of its wheat globally in Ukraine, or was buying half of it. That's 800,000 tons. We have to vote with no wheat coming out of Ukraine if this continues.
Jakob Kern of the World Food Programme, Deputy Chief of Staff there and Emergency Coordinator in Ukraine. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
You're welcome.
And roads have been completely destroyed, cutting off communities from each other. It's also meant that it's been difficult for people on that side of the road to get the help that they need. We also now understand that reinforcements have arrived.
Of more rain on its way. I mean, the combination of how things are at the moment, the fact that the waters are still quite high, presumably, and now fresh rainfall, the authorities must be really worried about this.
Who said they haven't had clean water since Monday, others haven't had power, and also there are food shortages across various parts of the province.
You're watching BBC News.
उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कर आता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया
an explosion.
This is a storm that has now claimed at least 14 lives overnight. You had people rushing to their basements.
We break stories from more places than any other international news broadcaster. We are the leaders in global.
Africa Eye goes undercover.
I've never driven a car. I don't know how to drive, but I have my driving license.
Dangerous vehicles, dodgy driving licenses, Is corruption adding to the carnage?
Gate prison.
There is a human story. This is our world.
Put your hands on the car machine. I just seen the cops kill somebody. They're
News.
Catch up with all the latest sports news and results from around the globe.
Orleans clinched the final NBA playoff spot. And we look ahead to the big world welterweight unification fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Jordanis Ugas.
Exciting 2-all draw in the Premier League. Just 1 point separates them at the top of the table. And they're still on course to meet in the Champions League final in Paris.
They're marching into the last four.
But next up, they're heading to Italy, where either City's hopes of a domestic...
The last game for the analyze, of course, and we will see who uses it better.
This is City's 5th FA Cup semi-final in the past 6 years, but manager Pep Guardiola has only seen his side lift the cup in 2019.
I'm not even sure, you know, the guys say it to me, like say if I score in training, like the lads are like, why don't you shoot? I don't know, just sometimes when I'm on the pitch, if I feel like someone's in a better position, I'm gonna pass it to them. I've spoken to him so many times, you know, and him saying, you know, that he's been happy with the way I've been performing and stuff, but coming for the price tag that I come for, I know that I probably should have more goals and assists.
So Jack Grealish there, and if the men's side are looking for any inspiration, they can take it from the women, because in the last few minutes they have gone through to the FA Cup final for women after a 4-1 win over West Ham. They last won the competition 2 years ago. There's about 3 minutes to go there. Tough for Tottenham's Premier League top 4 hopes. 3 other fixtures in the Premier League this Saturday. Manchester United play bottom side Norwich City at Old Trafford. Southampton this Saturday. Sampdoria, who are in poor form, they're taking on bottom side Salernitana, who are currently leading at 2-1 at half-time there. Udinese, they're leading Empoli 1-0 at the break, and earlier strugglers Cagliari got a big Head coach Glenn Moore has resigned after allegations against him prompted a team culture review. He became the Black Ferns boss back in 2015 and helped them win the 2017 World Cup. Hooker Takura Nata Arangamate had points, and the New Orleans Pelicans overcame a 13-point deficit in the fourth quarter to beat the depleted Los Angeles Clippers 105-101 in a play-in Friday night and earned the West's number 8 seed for the playoffs. The Pelicans made the playoffs for the first time.
Like that since maybe high school. But we all got young guys, even some of the older guys, are just really in tune with what we're doing. So it's fun. It's fun playing with these guys and then trying to gut out and get wins.
The East, and it's a battle. I mean, the team we beat tonight definitely deserved, a playoff spot, but this year is so tough. They weren't able to make it. So it's just a testament to our team that we kept fighting and we battled and
7-2 first session lead over Jamie Clark of Wales. And there was plenty of drama for surfing fans earlier at the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach event in Australia in the men's quarterfinals. There was an epic battle between Brazilian Olympic
and indeed the Maldives as we move into Sunday. You see those showers popping up with the heating of the day. Further north, where it stays dry and sunny, well, again, we've got some heat. 42 degrees in Nagpur, 41 in Delhi. To Central Asia, there's still plenty of heat, just speckled along this east coast of India, and quite a few more up towards the northeast, where we have had some quite wet weather over the last couple of days. Bangladesh could well see some of those showers as well. In Mumbai, it stays predominantly fine, dry, sunny and very warm as well.
14 years of war in Syria.
Tonight, it was far noisier, much louder, more constant, like rolling thunder for a very long time.
Remember, it was Russia that launched this offensive, sending its troops across the border.
When you come to this contemporary period, they are unafraid to address issues such as gender or politics, and very often the works test the boundaries of
The Pacific Islands are on the front lines of the climate emergency. As the world met for the COP26, I travelled there to meet women leading the fight against the climate crisis, including the region's only current serving
world. Who killed my grandfather? On BBC World News.
Our roads are not safe at all.
Africa Eye goes undercover, investigating whether corruption is adding to the carnage in Kenya.
Sides to some of the world's favourite holiday hotspots with the Travel Show team.
The Travel Show, sponsored by Turkish Airlines.
This is one of the most archaeologically significant sites in the world. The Roman city of Pompeii was destroyed almost 2,000 years ago in 79 ways since then, partly thanks to a new director who's made it his mission to protect the site whilst also improving the visitor experience.
It has always been a site evolving with the times, and so it has always been a site of the past. It's not only the big families, not only the senators and the ones who got the statues on the forum and the local authorities, but it's also the slaves and women who often...
Temperature changes from extreme drought all the way to heavy rain. Today, new technologies are helping to preserve this invaluable record of Roman life in the 1st century. Drones are helping to map the site, that bizarrely looks like a dog. Good dog. So Paolo, I've got to be honest, I am geeking out over this. This has got to be the coolest, most elaborate robot I think I've in 2022, after being closed for almost 2 years. Another part of Naples set for a boost this summer is the La Sanita district, an area that was once partly controlled by the
kings or prince or archaeologists or Isabella Rossellini. I don't know how many people. So I say, maybe we have to open it. And he said, no, 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 please, Alessandra, don't tell.
So you've got to tell me more. This is unbelievable.
Yes. So this is maybe one of the most beautiful tombs in the world, because everybody came here, the archaeologists, they had some reaction. One.
Right, back to the UK next, and we've been busy touring some of the country's biggest attractions as they prepare to deal with 2 years of pent-up demand this spring and summer. And this week...
I simply have to try. It's called the Smiler, and it's even collected its own following of superfans that cosplay in the colours of the ride. Guys, you look fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
After my day here, I can see places like this mean more to people than thrill-seeking alone.
I work in healthcare.
Team and gave Neapolitan people something to be proud of. And the owner of this bar claims to have a lock of Maradona's actual hair at the centre of what has become a shrine to the man himself.
Long time no see, Sri Lanka. So humid already here. Hot! And what's the sign? Have a look. Dear neighbors, Keep the canal clean. Oh, no good. No good. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, bros. Looks like he's doing a great job. And we have a lot to do, so somebody has to do it. And I'm very happy to see that a person like Fernando is working on VC.
Makes a difference, and shining a light on stories across the world gives our viewers another perspective. I love the pressure of being live, reflecting on the world in real time.
Alert in Lviv.
Officials here say 2 Russian jets attacked the city last night, having flown from Belarus. Apparently 4 missiles were fired, but they were shot down by Ukrainian air defences.
Well, I can only imagine how big the suffering is. It's not just food that's missing. There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no gas, there's nothing to cook. But also medicine. If you need medicine...
1 in 5 is still a significant statistical possibility. And it all depends what happens not only to all those voters who, for example, just 1% fewer voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is the veteran far-left candidate. If there's an election going...
Hello there. Heat continues to dominate the weather story across much of South Asia. On the earlier satellite picture, you can see this vast expanse of clear sky through Pakistan into the northwest of India. That's where we've had some really high temperatures. Some shower clouds you'll notice.
वही स्वाद नया अंदाज अमूल चीज ये मेरा चीज है.
How worried on BBC World News following the sentencing of Ali Harbi Ali for the murder of British Conservative MP Sir David Amess. Lee Milner speaks to those who knew the killer and explores the motives behind the murder.
Decades of experience, Sir David Amess.
David was kind of in a league of his own. He was absolutely devoted to his constituents. He was an archetypal constituency MP par excellence.
Mate, no, it's a, mate, drop the knife, drop the knife. Mate, you can drop the listen to me, look, it's only going to go one way. Just drop that knife. Please drop that knife for me, just drop the knife. We'll talk about it. You don't want
to... lot of confusion from the local residents with exactly what had gone on.
An air ambulance arrived on the nearby sports ground. Paramedics tried for almost 2.5 hours to save his life.
Just because of the attacks, there's police that are armed to the teeth. I'll be honest with you, there's been a lot of times where I've gone out in my head with the plan to do something, and then I would come back on. So, you know, because...
The community wanted to be together very much at that time, united in their grief and united above all here in prayer.
I was devastated when I heard he and I had been such close friends. He was my...
Absolutely unique, and that's why everybody's so distressed.
Everywhere you look, you can think of things he did.
I haven't met many politicians, but he was different.
We will struggle through each day of our lives. Our last thought before sleep will be of David. We will forever shed tears.
In operation, he was savagely and brutally murdered. And I think it just astounded us all.
As a politician and trying to help people and trying to do good things for people, and it's really important that we get good people in public life. But this is the risk that we're all taking. You know, and so many MPs today will be scared by this.
Despite their
David believed that the fundamental duty of a Member of Parliament was to serve the constituents who elect them, and I completely agree. And despite this tragedy, actually to keep calm and carry on.
Of this new coronavirus in early 2020. This has been such a fast-moving story and was relentless. Some of the images I've seen in intensive care units, they will stay with me forever. The warning signs here to be able to film the very first volunteers to receive one of the vaccines during the trials.
Ultimately, it is science we have to thank for giving us this route out of the pandemic.
Coronavirus is going to be with us.
Now on BBC World News, a global view on the big stories happening in the UK this week in Dateline London.
Of the French news magazine and website Marianne. Michael Goldfarb, former foreign correspondent with the US Public Radio, now host of the FRDH podcast, that's the first rough draft of history, and Catherine Pepinster, who is a former editor of the Catholic newspaper The Tablet, to have broken his own COVID law. Lots to talk about this Easter weekend. Catherine, let's start with what's happening in Ukraine. How big a strain is this putting, the war, on the Orthodox
and the Russian Orthodox Church led by Patriarch Kirill? They feel that what Kirill has been doing, endorsing the war, effectively blessing it, making it a holy war, is completely unacceptable. It's got to break away from Moscow.
How important has Russian Orthodoxy been to the sort of narrative that President Putin is trying to construct?
It's a very interesting question, Sean, because despite the 50-year Russian society going back into Tsarist times, and unlike in France or in the US or even in the UK, the separation never really happened. And it's really interesting, you know, Vladimir Putin was baptized as a boy, and his dad. However, Russian Orthodoxy is like an essential strand of Russian culture and political life, and essentially always has been. And I think that this is why this combination of Kirill and Putin with
But then, I mean, in Russia, and despite 70 years of communism, the church and the military have always been hand in hand. I think, I mean, I looked at an interview of Putin. You know, orthodoxy, the Russian kind, is a tool of foreign policy. You only have to go to Paris on the river bank. There is this beautiful, very beautiful Orthodox church.
So it's kind of strong, almost autocratic leadership
and
is something of value again politically.
And if you go to St. Petersburg, of course, you can now visit the shrines to the Romanovs. You know, they've been consecrated as saints by the Orthodox.
The power being used for propaganda purposes, but I double-checked and triple-checked, but it's online, so who can be sure? But at TASS News website,
the bombs, you know, that went to Syria and Crimea. So, well, obviously their prayers weren't strong enough for the flagship Moskva. Right. That didn't save it.
Catherine, it's interesting that Kirill...
I think there's a sense in which he and others in the Russian Orthodox Church see Ukraine, Belarus, Russia as part of one holy place, and that they belong to one another. There is a way almost that the opponents of the war also talk about fraternity, don't they? They've talked about a fratricidal war.
Yes.
There is a closeness between the two countries. There is a proximity, but it's how you express that. That's
the stronghold of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, which is not aligned at all with Orthodoxy. It's aligned with the Roman Church. And why not? It was, before it was ever part of Russia, it was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It is.
One last thought for all of you, because you mentioned Roman Catholicism. We'll leave the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, although if anyone is interested in that, BBC Sounds has a great programme from In Our Time recently, the Radio 4 series, which looks at exactly that subject. And it's a really interesting pointed statement, Catherine, about the right of people under threat to defend themselves. Now, that can't be a coincidence that he should choose to deliver that message this weekend in the middle of the war in Ukraine.
Absolutely not, and I'm sure that we'll hear more from him this weekend. Russian politicians, Russian ministers, and then also talking to Kirill and his people too. So it's a two-pronged thing, and there are various suggestions about the Pope going to see Kirill at some...
Listen, what were the Gaullists, now the Republicans? I mean, their performance, not to put too fine a point on it, was pathetic. Less than 6% between them of those who voted. What's happened to those, what were, as I was saying in the intro, broad church?
Now known as Rassemblement National. And Jean-Marie Le Pen, you may remember him, is 95, as strong as an oak, was allowed, in a way, to have a voice. And, you know, because it was also the eruption on the national debate of the second generation of North African immigrants, who were French, who were not passing visitors, who wanted to talk about racism, about multiculturalism. He's on the right, on the left, doesn't matter. He's a Democrat and
a demagogue. Would you
a
say?
demagogue?
Is that
Exactly.
unfair to her?
Oh, no, it's not unfair at all.
And all had the same surname, Le Pen. I mean, this is the fifth in 20 years. Well, you know, this 5-year timeline, Sean. 3 years ago was there COVID, and 6 months ago we just learned that Russia was building up troops in Belarus and along the... I think 5 years, you know, it's which has happened now. I mean, Emmanuel Macron came out of nothing, and he just invented a party and could win. Is, I think, unusual, and I'm not sure that it's sustainable without a charismatic figure.
It's not sustainable, but the new generation of movement, with Emmanuel Macron on top. So it's a completely recomposition of the French political landscape, but I don't think the left and the right, the way we've known them, are going to be back.
Can I just pick up
the importance of French tradition? She's talked about civilization. It feels like there's some similar language there. This sense of people wanting to embrace some kind of
France who are French by birth and are French citizens and all the rest of it, but have been treated sometimes in the politics as kind of the other, to be frightened.
Well, I mean, we've got. It's very interesting how the different religions have been voting. Top atheist country in the world, you know. And if you look at people who say they are non-religious or simply atheist, well, they are a bit on the left, on the extreme left, a bit on the extreme right.
Sit around this table for any reason will think, oh, you can't do that. You cannot break the rules, the laws you just made in so brazen a fashion, even for a 50 quid fine. But I have a feeling there are a lot of people out in the country at large who think,
middle of a pandemic, with prosecuting people who've broken the rules, that they thought this was the most efficient way of doing it. So in other words, it wasn't necessarily a judgment on how serious or not it was was more an administrative decision.
But I'm not sure that many people did break the rules, because we have now a cost of living crisis in this country, and we may well start to see the impact of that when we have the elections in May. That's when people might vote.
Integrity and everything is a British Prime Minister is expected to be doing. So I haven't lost faith in the British. I've lost complete faith in their British Prime Minister, in their Prime Minister, and 2 years.
Well, they will back him unless they think they have a better candidate.
And they don't at the moment.
Well, surely they must have a better candidate.
Well, I mean,
they got rid of all the conservatives.
If the war gets heavy and
where you're watching this programme, then a happy Easter to you from all of us on Dateline London for this weekend. Goodbye.
Almond butter.
This is the Russian attack playbook, perfected in over 10 years of war in Syria.
Tonight, it was far noisier, much louder.
Breaking news.
Kenya, a country plagued by deadly road accidents. We investigate dodgy driving licenses. Is corruption adding to the carnage?
As long as we have these corrupt individuals in the driving schools and these officers in the inspection centers, we will continue.
This is BBC News. Welcome if you're watching here in the UK or around the world. I'm Mariam Mashiri. Our top stories. Russia warns the US and its allies against plans to send asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda are a breach of international law. That's according to the UN's Refugee Agency. Developments. There have been reports of new strikes on the outskirts of the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, and explosions have also been heard in the western city of Lviv. Well, the Russian Foreign Ministry has said that it's banning the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and other senior ministers
caught in the crossfire. Vladimir Putin's warned other nations supplying Ukraine with weapons would fuel the conflict and risk unpredictable consequences. Ukraine's president sees it differently.
The more and this.
Well, you heard in that report, for the last 2 nights there have been strikes here in the suburbs of Kyiv. It is a city that is very, very slowly coming back to life, but this is, of course, the famous Maidan, one of the symbols of this city.
People who perhaps maybe would have been thinking about that a few days ago.
I think a lot of people haven't come back yet, and certainly when you are around this city, many of the shops are still closed, with tape on the windows, with sandbags at the front, and that is Vladimir Putin has said that if that happens, there will be unpredictable consequences here. So I think wherever people are in Ukraine, they are watching the latest developments, the latest diplomacy, and feeling this small but fresh sense of nervousness.
By the flooding. Well, the government says it's allocated $68 million for what it calls emergency relief. Well, these pictures are the deadly, show you some of the destruction from the deadliest storms to strike the coastal city of Durban in Libya.
Over here who have been able to collect a vital resource. But like this situation basically is an indication of the depravity that many people are actually facing within this community and other areas of KwaZulu-Natal who are facing quite a dire from government and other social agencies. But as you can see, people of Amawoti are trying to do their best in quite a bad situation.
Well, it's emerged that the UK... You're watching BBC News.
And indeed the Maldives as we move into Sunday. You see those showers popping up with the heating of the day. Further north where it stays dry and sunny, well, again, we've got some heat. 42 degrees in Nagpur, 41 in Delhi. To Central Asia, there's still plenty of heat. Bangladesh could well see some of those showers as well. In Mumbai, it stays predominantly fine, dry, sunny and very warm as well. But in Tashkent, those temperatures will be dropping at least for a time. Some much cooler weather on the way in Nur Sultan.
Of Eugene over his two great enemies. On one hand, the Ottoman sultans, and on the other hand, Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, who'd humiliated and disdained him as a young man.
Eugene's summer palace projects...
There won't be any long-term sustainable peace or stability in Afghanistan unless all the factions, all the ethnic groups are represented.
When big names talk, they talk to the BBC.
Who? What, the person with the knife? Yes.
They say he's got a knife and he's just stabbed her.
He's in the main church. He's in, you need an armed response unit here. We have, yeah. He's coming.
What should have been a normal day. Local residents waiting to see their MP a man with 4 decades of experience, Sir David Amos.
David was kind of in a league of his own. He was absolutely devoted.
Even if he knew he was going to get a bit of a hard time and ask some difficult questions he didn't necessarily want to answer, he would always make himself available. And I think that's how constituents felt, whether they voted for him or not. They felt that...
To tragedy.
It's a carving knife, a big kitchen carving knife. How big, roughly? It's in his hand. How big would you say that knife is? 12 inches. 12 inches. He was trying to get it off them. He went...
Drop the knife now! Mate, drop the knife. You can drop it. Mate, listen to me. Drop the knife. Mate, no, it's a... Mate, drop the knife. Drop the knife. Mate, you can drop it. Listen to me. Look.
All hell broke loose.
As you can see, I was one of the first reporters on the scene after the incident.
This is where it happened. You know, police were called to reports of a stabbing here on Eastwood North Road here in Leigh-on-Sea just after.
We started to see all the police vehicles arrive and the armed police close off the road. A lot of confusion from the local residents with exactly what had gone on.
And
probably within the first hour, we were aware that it was a potential terrorist act.
Ali was pictured several times on CCTV as he made his way calmly to Leigh-on-Sea from his home in North London, on the tube and in the street.
Spot where they come out of, what they're doing, but, you know, obviously because of the attacks, there's police that are armed to the teeth. I'll be honest with you, there's been a lot of times where I've gone out in my head with the plan to do something, and then I would come back on.
But October 15th was different.
I sent emails to, I think, his assistant.
His assistant?
David Amos, Sir David Amos, saying that, what's it called, I live in, I think, Westcliff-on-Sea, and the reason I dropped the knife in front of the police officer was because my sister was on the phone crying her eyes out, you know.
It really did send shockwaves through the community. People were upset, in disbelief, shocked, and
Such close friend. He was my best friend in Parliament, no doubt about it. And I just couldn't believe that he wouldn't be there anymore.
It was a sense of shock in this part.
Feelings for us as a family, obviously as to what we went through, and that another family is having to go through that again. It's horrific.
A much-loved MP who did loads for his constituents, well known by the ordinary
politicians, but he was different.
Ali Harbi Ali denied murder and preparing acts of terrorism and told the court he'd no longer use the word wrong. Mr. Ali replied, "If I thought I did anything wrong, I wouldn't have done it." Ali Harbi Ali was found guilty of murder and preparing acts of terrorism. Jurors took just 18 minutes to reach a verdict.
Our last thought before sleep will be of David. We will forever shed tears for the man we have lost. It breaks our heart to know that our husband and father would have greeted the murderer with a smile of friendship.
It's months after his death.
I am happy to announce that Southend will be accorded the city status it so clearly deserves.
Part of his legacy was that he showed other members of Parliament.
Continue to meet the people who voted for them, as Sir David did.
David believed that the fundamental duty of a member of Parliament was to serve the constituents who elect them. And I completely agree.
Defence spending. The West is pumping billions more into countering the threat from Russia. I'll hear from the weapons makers and Germany's former defence minister about what difference it'll make. Join me, Aaron Hazelhurst, on Talking Business Weekly, here on BBC World.
I don't know how to drive, but I have my driving license.
Dangerous vehicles, dodgy driving licenses. Is corruption adding to the carnage?
As long as we have these corrupt individuals in the driving school.
Tragically, he dies on the way to hospital.
We need to act fast and be firm so that we stop these senseless accidents and deaths. We cannot continue keeping quiet without knowing that even your own life could be lost.
First, Rocky, which has 30 Kenyan branches. We've learned someone at this Eastleigh branch in Nairobi helps people break the law. Our investigator will say he needs a driving license because he wants to become a taxi driver.
Driving license.
Like Hassan at Rocky, Silas also starts by offering 3 weeks of driver training. But when our investigator insists she doesn't have...
The vehicle was given a sticker. It is a matter of money. You have money, your vehicle will pass any inspection unit.
Is what David says he uncovered a one-off? We decided to find out. Richard was lucky to survive his crash. He and his family know well the devastating impact accidents can have.
Former Vice President, this was an interview.
And road deaths. ATA believes designing safe pedestrian crossings and junctions is critical to reducing deaths.
In this particular junction, there's a curve. There's a curve coming up to the road, there's a curve.
He denies any wrongdoing. Hassan at Rocky Driving School takes longer than Silas. Then he finally comes through. Our undercover reporter has his license with us. Our reporter later picks up his license from Jeremiah at NTSA headquarters. He says the NTSA man wanted another 2,000 Kenyan shillings before handing it over.
Everything was done within the premises there.
We gave Madenge 24,000 Kenyan shillings, just over $200 US. Will any of our cash be given to bribe someone, as Madenge had earlier claimed?
This cash should be a write-off.
How could this vehicle possibly pass a safety test? Did Madenge bribe someone? Were testers naive or incompetent? We asked James Madenge why he told us.
It just dawned on me that the possibility of me losing her, it's non-zero, it's possible.
And to find out how they're coming to terms with their new lives as refugees.
They're here, they're waiting.
Besieged parts of Ukraine, including the city of Mariupol. And in the latest developments, there have been reports of new strikes on the outskirts of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, and explosions have also been heard in the western city of Lviv.
Well, the invasion, but it says the true number will be higher and more are dying every day. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Lviv.
Well, our correspondent Anna Foster has been giving us the very latest from Kyiv.
For the last 2 nights, more just moved away towards the west so they could stay in Ukraine, be ready to come back. But they moved away from the fiercest fighting. And of course, we still see people moving from the east, from the Donbass, from places like Kharkiv, where the fighting is still fierce.
Community known as Kokoba, there's an informal settlement just a few hundred meters ahead of me. We went there earlier, escorting a rescue team that went in to try and recover the body of an 8-year-old girl, as well as a 35-year-old.
This community, it's affected pretty much all of us, and personally, it's, you know, we've had water cuts, we've had electricity cuts, there's debris on the road, it's not safe to travel in many areas, and you know, you are scared. With the ground already saturated, the situation could get much worse than it is right now. I mean, with 40,000 people displaced, almost 400 people dead, this is a horrific situation all around.
And of course, these weather events under opposition parties have proposals. Well, Dave Penman is General Secretary of the FDA. That's the union for senior civil servants.
The majority of people arriving were men. Now, in terms of numbers today, they've yet to be confirmed, but I'm being told possibly around 250 people today. There have been large figures throughout the course of this week. Hardly surprising when you look out towards the channel about trying to push through a deterrent, because many things have been tried, closer working with the French, also talking of pushing boats back. That idea has now been abandoned, but the numbers have continued to rise. Already 6,000, as you say, so far the answer. Well, people aren't agreed on that. Word is certainly spreading in the camps in Calais. There is one theory. This may prompt people to attempt the journey. There may be a rise in numbers in the short term as people try to get across the channel before this new policy.
The UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss and Defence Secretary Ben Wallace from entering the country. Now, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have made a rare public appearance at the Invictus Games in the Netherlands. The couple took part. So tell us a little about your background and how you came to be involved in this sport that's helped your rehabilitation so much.
So I went over to America, and it was just like going to try some.
How important do you think Prince Harry's involvement obviously has been since creating the Invictus Games, his continued support and involvement? He means a lot, doesn't he, to all the people who compete and all the people who organise it?
Yeah, Prince Harry means...
Sport helps people overcome. Can you tell me about the psychological effects of war and how they can impact soldiers like yourself?
Yeah, so my injuries, I lost both my legs and my right, and I'm still competing nowadays after the Invictus Games.
So how are you competing now? What level are you at?
So I'm at a level where I'm trying for a Paralympics or a Commonwealth.
The messaging platform WhatsApp for delaying the launch of a new feature in Brazil. Jair Bolsonaro said WhatsApp's decision not to launch the communities feature after October's presidential election amounted to discrimination. The messaging service has not replied to the accusation of violence in Jerusalem after clashes on Friday between Palestinian demonstrators and Israeli police. More than 150 Palestinians have been injured in clashes with Israeli police at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem. 3 Israelis
who were causing a riot. It said that they had thrown fireworks after dawn prayers, that they had also thrown stones towards Jewish worshippers at the Western Wall just below. That's, of course, the holiest place where Jews can pray. Also not heard any fresh reports of serious arrests, raids by Israeli security forces, which we've had repeatedly in the past week, because in the background, of course, to all of what happened on Friday, and then that was followed by what the Israeli army said was a counter-terrorism operation in the West Bank, and a number of Palestinians were killed in clashes there.
The world-renowned pianist Lang Lang has been hitting the high notes during the mountain to aid his playing. You're watching BBC News. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Click. We're outside again. Sensors to track dangerous hotspots.
The robots are operating like a swarm of bees would.
Good luck to be a cyborg.
It won't be long before...
The race is on to decarbonise aviation.
Cleaning up the stuff that comes out of those. AI is changing the world.
London to Paris in half an hour.
Touchless coffee.
Hannibal Talon, BBC World News, as I report on the impact of the war on the sector.
The devastating war in Ukraine has brought about a fundamental rethink in defence spending. The West is pumping billions more into countering the threat from Russia. I'll hear from the weapons maker.
BBC World News in an exclusive interview. Clive Myrie sits down with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
In the centre of Kyiv.
How difficult has it been for you to be here through all this without your family?
It's my job. I have to do it. And
oh, it's Emmanuel Macron.
Yeah. He phoned me. Yes, we have connections.
Okay.
Yes, that's it.
So he's dropped you a message. Oh, I can see it.
I don't know. Yes, but he just tried to reach you, my friend, when you have someone.
When you have some time. A fight is that going to be for Ukrainian forces, the battle for the East?
Я думаю, що це найскладніша ситуація.
I think this is the most difficult situation, the battle for Donbass. That is where our key power, and they do not simply take territories. They destroy everything in those territories as they go.
Забирають території. Вони ж по ходу цих територій просто руйнують.
They rape people, take everything they can.
Urban street fighting that we saw here in the north around the capital. Are you getting the right weapons you need from the West?
First of all, we have been receiving weapons. We've been receiving them using the process which... Is there enough of everything? We don't think there is.
Given that you say that Russian troops are looting, they're destroying, you must be so worried about the civilians in the East, in the middle of this coming...
There is no life there. Am I worried about it? I am, very much so. But unfortunately, our enemy destroys everything. The cynical thing about it is that their philosophy is that they came to liberate people.
A peace. How do you move forward? How do you sit across the table to try to stop the war? How do you do that?